Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today I've got two guests. Sean Wade, who's the CEO of Power Metal Resources, who are a London-listed metals exploration development company, which finance and manages global resource projects and is further seeking large-scale metal discoveries. The company has a principal focus on opportunities offering district-scale potential across a global portfolio, including precious base, strategic and energy metal exploration in North America, Africa, and Australia. Project interests range from early stage greenfield exploration to latter stage prospects and companies subject to drill programs. And also we have Tristan Pottas, who's the CEO of First Development Resources, who are a UK-based Australian-focused exploration company with early-stage interests in WA and Northern Territory in Australia. And they own 3 highly prospective gold and copper projects in that region. So that's welcome both Sean and Tristan to the podcast. How you doing, guys?
Good to see you. Thanks a lot for having us on, Rob.
Yeah, cheers, Rob. Good to see you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys coming onto the podcast. I know how busy you are at the moment. So I wondered if we can both introduce yourselves first of all. Tell us a little bit about your career, your background. The audience likes this part of the podcast. I know it's the beginning, but they get to understand and know a little bit about the guests. So hand it over to you, Sean, first of all.
Great. Thanks very much, Rob. Well, look, thanks very much for having us both on. So in terms of my background, I mean, I've been in this role since March this year, and it's been a very busy time, as we'll get on to talk about. But my longer term background is essentially, I'm a finance guy. So I spent 20 years in capital markets, 14 of those at Cazenove, and most of the rest of that time at Liberum. And a lot of that time was spent helping companies, not necessarily specifically mining companies, but lots of companies to get their message across to investors and help them raise money. And latterly, during my city career, I became much more focused on the mining sector, and as I said, helping companies to really express their investment proposition in a way that can attract shareholder interest. That led me, I suppose, inexorably, I suppose you might say, into the kind of investor relations and business development world. So about 10 years ago, I moved from the city to start working in a number of companies over time in the mining sector, and hopefully over that period when I've helped those companies to raise money, to build their investor profiles and to build shareholder registers, that I've managed hopefully to develop an understanding of what it is investors are looking for in mining companies, particularly those that are exploring in an early stage and which are inevitably fairly in need of capital, on a regular basis, and need to be able to explain an investment case that's based on the macro environment, the commodity markets, but also the future potential for assets, and that's really what we're all about at Power Metal. As you mentioned in your introduction, we're looking to finance and develop a number of projects, many of which are inevitably a fairly early stage, and make sure that those businesses and the company overall are properly capitalized and in great shape to be able to deliver that value to shareholders. So, I'm not a geologist, although I've learned a little bit about it, particularly from Tristan and other colleagues. But I'm more of a finance guy. So my job really is to represent Power Metal to the outside world, to investors in the capital markets, and to ensure that the business has the right levels of capital in order to deliver its exploration objectives, and obviously seek to make money for shareholders by monetizing those opportunities over time, and which hopefully and certainly in better market conditions will drive our share price. So that's what I hope I bring to this company.
Yeah. And Tristan?
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks again, Rob, for having us on today. I am a mining geologist by profession, although I have just recently obtained my MSc in mining engineering from the Camborne School of Mines. And my career to date has basically provided me with exposure to all phases of the mining cycle, from early stage exploration to operations, and then construction and development. I started my career in the UK, potash mine in Yorkshire, immediately after university, before then moving out to the Western Australian goldfields, where I did my time in Kalgoorlie, which was a really interesting opportunity for me. In the goldfields, again, I was on a graduate program, so everything, again, exploration, underground, open pit, resource, that side of things. And then I had, after spending a couple of years out bush, I relocated to Perth and did a FIFO role in the northern goldfields. After a couple of years doing that, I had an opportunity to relocate to Latin America, which was a chance to work in a completely different jurisdiction, different geology, different culture, which was really interesting. It was a great opportunity for me. And then I was due to go back actually to Australia, but on the way back, I stopped in the UK, and while back home, I got involved with the Sirius Minerals project, which I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with. While at Sirius, I joined as the 5th employee. At that point, we had an idea to build the biggest mine of its type anywhere in the world, to mine a mineral which nobody considered economic, to sell a product into one of the most conservative markets on the planet, being the agricultural market, to do it all with very little in the way of capital initially, and do it in a national park in the United Kingdom. So it was a massive challenge, but through that process, as I mentioned at the top of this discussion, I got exposure to every single element of I guess the challenges of establishing a brand new mining company in a place like the UK. And it was a hugely exciting journey for me. Now, I know a lot of people remember Sirius for perhaps from a shareholding perspective, but for me, it was a real example of a small company looking to achieve an incredible result. And in my opinion, in many respects, that's what we did. We took an idea and we developed it to a point where we raised significant capital in terms of $1.2 billion of equity-like capital to develop this huge mine. And then we ended up selling it to a major mining company in Anglo-American. So that was a really interesting experience for me. But through that process, I really realized that what I find most exciting in our industry is the junior end. It's high risk, but it's potentially high reward. It's hugely rewarding, but hugely exciting as well. And I had an opportunity to join Power Metal Resources. And then when I joined Power's business model, as Sean will discuss shortly, is one of spinning out. There's a spin out element where packaging up projects of a similar sort of nature in different jurisdictions and installing management teams to take them forward. And I was identified as a potential candidate to take forward First Development Resources, which, as you mentioned, Rob, is an Australian-focused mineral exploration company where we're looking to make a significant discovery, whether that be in gold and copper in Western Australia or transition metals in the Northern Territory. So right now my focus is split between assisting Power in the larger group, but also getting First Development Resources to a point where it's financially independent, and we're developing the business in our own right.
Yeah, that's great. So what I want to do now is just speak about one company at a time instead of flicking between both companies. So let's talk about Power Metal Resources. So Sean, I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about the company and the structure, and also obviously the company's business model.
Yeah, so I think you covered a bit of it in your introduction, but just to sort of reiterate, so we are, beg your pardon, we're listed on the AIM market in London. Market cap currently around 15 or 16 million pounds sterling. And we invest in a variety of mining projects in various geographies around the world. And what we seek to do is, and one way to describe us really would be, unlike a conventional mining company where you would have one or two development projects or exploration projects which you hope to take through the development phase into production, we are more of a project incubator. And in fact, one of our shareholders, Rick Rule, who is probably well known to your listeners, who invested in us recently, describes us as a junior merchant bank in the resources space, which I think is quite a neat way to describe what we do, which is to say, we're an investor in mining projects, and we seek to undertake methodical and cost-effective exploration. But then we seek to crystallize the value that we create in those processes and monetize that for shareholders. And what I mean by that, essentially, and it's obviously very helpful to have Tristan here as a live example, is where we can put a group of assets together in the case of FDR, in the Northern Territory in Western Australia, and create a spin-out vehicle that can stand on its own 2 feet as an IPO and a company in its own right. So what essentially Power does is to take the early stage as an active investor, as I say, with some methodical and cost-effective exploration, get the company to a point where, or in this case, the company, or in other cases, just a single asset, but get those assets to a point where they can find their own capital structure, and essentially the bigger costs, the exploration drilling costs, for example, will be met by, in the case of FDR, their own shareholders going forward. So, our shareholders will benefit by having made an early investment into the asset, helped us do some of that early stage work, but generally the early stage work is of a sort of lower cost. The more expensive stuff comes later when the company has IPO'd or spun out in some other way. So that's the incubator model that I'm talking about. So where do we operate? Well, we've typically been able to offer investors very, very safe geographies for their investment. So we've got a big focus in North America, both in the US and Canada, and that means in the case of Canada, our uranium asset, but also our now 62% holding in gold and metal resources, which was a spin-out IPO we did earlier this year, which is focused on Nevada, and in particular a high quality and strategic tungsten asset called Pilot Mountain. So North America, Canada. We have some businesses in Africa, and the biggest of those is called Malopo Farms, which is in Botswana, which is a well-known, very safe jurisdiction. And then, of course, Australia, as I mentioned, which includes First Development Resources, which we've talked about, but also our assets in the Victoria Goldfields, which comes under the name of New Ballarat Gold Corporation. So very exciting collection of licenses there. So those are our 3 main centers, but we've also been talking a bit recently about our upcoming investment in Saudi Arabia and Oman, which is a very exciting opportunity for shareholders. We're at an early stage there. At the moment, we're having lots of meetings and building relationships with the objective of getting some early stage exploration assets in what's called the Arabian Shield, which encompasses both countries, and we hope to be able to talk a lot more about that and the opportunities there. But the same model will apply. We will hope to gain exploration licenses where we can do some of that early stage work, add value, and then seek to crystallize and monetize that value for shareholders. So that's really the incubator point, and where we differ from the normal sort of junior mining company model. I mean, one of the things we've done recently is presented to a lot of investors in the US through the Rick Rule Symposium and the network that we built up there. And what the US investors in particular seem to be very attracted to is not just a diversified model, in other words, diversifying away their single commodity or single country risk, but with the upside that shareholders get in our in the asset set as it goes forward. So by which I mean, take gold and metal, for example, that's IPO'd. We remain a 62% shareholder. When they make a discovery, which we're very confident that they will, then our shareholders will benefit because we own 62% of it. But we're not bearing all the cost of that exploration program. That's being done by the gold and metal resources shareholders themselves. So it's a model that gives you diversified risk profile, but also tremendous upside from the ongoing exploration and development.
Yeah. You mentioned in your introduction that you're obviously being brought on to, I suppose, tell the mining story to investors. What are investors looking for in mining companies, and especially if they don't know much about the industry? because it is probably different to many other industries. What is, I suppose, the message that you give the audience or your investors about obviously power metals, but also you as a mining company?
Well, I think fundamentally what investors are looking for is an investment on the huge global economic transition to green energy, whether that's power generation, which obviously would involve uranium, or electric vehicles, wind turbines, these kinds of things that require lots of copper, lots of nickel, and obviously other what are called transition metals. So that's the big macro trend that's driving or will be driving the mining sector going forward. So in previous cycles, you've had other factors such as Chinese urbanization, for example, or other sort of globalization factors. At the moment, the big theme in mining really is transitioning to a greener and lower carbon world. And of course, the mining industry, overall plays an enormous part in that. I mean, we could talk about, the supply deficits. We could do a separate podcast just on the supply deficits in these critical metals. I mean, copper alone, the numbers are staggering in terms of what's required to meet these objectives versus what is currently in production. So that's really, where investors are looking now. You can make mining investment very complicated. You can talk about very specific geological aspects. You can, talk about, getting really into detail on different deposits and one versus the other and so on, which a lot of investors obviously do as well. We have a lot of very sophisticated investors who really understand their geology, they really understand their mining engineering and so on. And fortunately, we've got some very smart people on our team who are able to to help with that and satisfy that. And some of our material does go into some of those more technical aspects. But I would say that fundamentally, the big driver of the sector overall is this sort of green transition. So we're in an extremely good position to give people that investment. I mean, we're exposed to all of those commodities, and whether it be lithium, rare earths, nickel, copper, also, as you mentioned at the beginning, precious metals as well, which is, whilst not necessarily directly involved in the energy transition, are certainly very fashionable at the moment in respect to people's concerns over global inflation and so on. So these are all the metals that are, I think, part of the sort of current investment trend in mining. And we're able to offer people a diversified investment that for many of our investors, they say, well, it's very difficult for me to pick a lithium company and a copper company and a PGE company or whatever. Well, we do that for you. We've built a portfolio of assets, which we've obviously judged whether or not they're good assets and whether they have great opportunity. We're seeking to add value to those assets, and so we're helping investors really to have a blended and diversified investment on that green transition. So that's what I sort of hope to get across to people, and I think that's been reasonably successful. And as we talked about the spin-out model, it also gives people the opportunity to specialize should they wish to. So you'll look at Power Metals portfolio and you'll say, well, I like all those different pieces, but there's a great opportunity, for example, in uranium, where we're doing a small spin-out IPO. And obviously, if you like the Australian, Western Australian and Northern Territory story that Tristan tells, you've got that specific play as well. So there is an opportunity within our portfolio to have lots of different sort of types of exposure, and we're always looking to recycle that as well. So it's not just a question of the current asset set. At some point will be sold, monetized, spun out, whatever. We look to recycle that capital, and that's why we're looking at Saudi Arabia, for example. And there'll be other opportunities going forward where there is an opportunity to find new assets. And of course, the stage of the market we're at the moment. Clearly, if the one thing that is happening is lots of M&A. There are lots of opportunities around, and we're looking at things all the time that could add to the portfolio as well. So, it's I like people to think we're active managers of a portfolio of assets. We know what we're doing. We know how to add value to them, and over time you'll see very strong balance sheet growth, which is really our sort of key metric and our key performance metric.
Obviously, you mentioned the various jurisdictions that you do operate in. What commodities would you say you primarily focus on?
Well, I mean, as I say, it's very much the sort of, the transition metals and the precious metals. So, we talk a lot about our uranium portfolio, and we're going to be updating shareholders hopefully very soon on what's going on there. We've got an exploration program actively underway. We've got a very exciting lithium opportunity in Ontario, in Canada. Again, something that we're going to be able to talk about more soon with some good exploration results hopefully coming through there. We've got also an exploration going on in one of our gold assets, which is in also Botswana. Again, that's going to be subject for an update for shareholders. So those are the things that we're sort of currently talking about. But in addition to that, we've got licenses targeting nickel, copper, platinum group elements in Tanzania. It's a smaller investment for us. We've got a silver asset also in Canada. And obviously, I don't want to take Tristan Pottas because I know he wants to talk about it. What's contained within the first development portfolio. So, there's no sort of one specific thing that we focus on. We've got a very broadly spread portfolio, both geographically, I mean, and by commodity. And we're, as I said, we're always looking to change, to recycle that and develop that. But those are our real focuses at the moment.
Yeah. Obviously, you recently announced the uranium exploration program to date, and obviously the licenses there that you have around the Athabasca Basin. I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about, obviously you're only allowed to tell us so much, but I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about those plans. And I believe obviously the current program is underway at the moment.
That's right. So look, this is extremely exciting for us, and something I know our shareholders are very, very keen to hear about. It's a very large footprint. It's 1,000 square kilometers, with encompassing 17 different license areas in and around the Athabasca Basin in northern Canada. And this is the world's premier address for uranium mining and exploration, and it's very well established. I mean, one thinks of Cameco and Denison in particular as well-known names that have had a lot of success in Athabasca, and it's a very big opportunity for us. The program is underway at the moment, and as I've said at the top, it's methodical and it's cost effective. So we're doing some airborne surveys, and we're doing some soil sampling, some geochemical work. Now, what that's going to do will be to establish high quality drill targets for the next phase of the program. Now, what does that next phase look like? Well, we're doing a small spin out IPO, which we've talked about, which will take three, maybe four properties, which will stand on its own 2 feet, do its own exploration work, and develop from there. And then the balance of the portfolio, we'll see. We at the moment, it's very central to the power portfolio, and we will develop those as we go and update shareholders on that at the appropriate time. But it's a very exciting opportunity, and a lot of upside there. So it's right up in the far north in Saskatchewan. We've got one of our colleagues is out there at the moment, and he's been sharing some pictures on Twitter of the wilderness that he's in, and he's flying over it in a helicopter, helping to establish, as I said, those drill targets, and we're looking forward to updating people on that very soon.
You describe obviously the business model as a project incubator model. Can you explain how this has been executed with any obviously recent IPOs and that have, and what are potentially coming up?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most obvious one in that was Gold and Metal Resources. So we completed that IPO earlier this year, and as I said earlier, that's focused in Nevada in the US. So that's essentially the substantial tungsten deposit, which is known as Pilot Mountain, but there's also some gold assets there as well, and that's been a very good example. And we've seen the value that we've created there go straight onto our balance sheet. So if you look at the shareholders' equity of the business, it's directly added to that. So that's a very clear demonstration of what we're doing. And of course, the next one that we're doing, and the number one priority for the business at the moment, is first development resources. And Tristan, I know, is going to talk about that, but that's the next one off the block, and it's extremely exciting, and it's had an extremely good response from investors. So that's the next one. So those in terms of the incubator IPO model, those are the two most most obvious. But as I mentioned, also the one we're doing in Canada, the spin-off from the uranium portfolio, that's also underway at the moment, and we hope to be able to update people on that later in the year. But we're in the currently in a phase where we're preparing it for a listing in London, and we'll be, as I said, we'll be talking a lot more about that going forward. But there are opportunities across the portfolio, where we talk about Malopo Farms, for example, which is our potentially district scale opportunity in nickel in Botswana, where what we're looking for there at the moment is a strategic joint venture partner. And we've had a number of conversations on that. And what we're looking to do there is to bring in a partner, most probably a corporate, who will assist us with the next phase of exploration there, because we need to probably spend quite a lot of money proving out the geological model that we've got, and that we're confident that we've proved. And so that won't be an IPO spin out in the same sense, but it will be a monetization and a crystallization event for shareholders. And as I said, that's underway. But I look across the portfolio, and I think there are a lot of opportunities for either more IPOs or spin outs, or even in some cases just an outright sell of an asset. So what I want to get across to people is we're here to make you money. We're not necessarily wedded to one particular thing that is our sort of founding asset or anything like that. We're looking to bring assets in at a great price, add value to them, and then monetize and crystallize that value for shareholders. So there are no sort of sacred cows, if you like, in the portfolio. It's a corporate finance exercise as much as anything. We're here to make money for shareholders, and I'm very confident that in slightly better market conditions than we've endured over the last year or two, we will achieve that.
Before we speak to Tristan, just wondering if you just tell us about some of your other projects and the key milestones we can look forward to over the sort of next 6 months.
Yeah, so as I said, I think the updates that we're going to be able to give people. 6 months is quite a long time in this business, I have to say. A lot can change in that time, but we're certainly going to be talking about our Northwind lithium asset, which sits in within Ion Battery Resources, where we've got an exploration program underway. We've announced that's happening. We want to give people an update and some results on that. Tati and Botswana, likewise, exploration program underway, and an update to come. And of course, Athabasca Basin, as we've talked about at a bit of length there, that's coming too. So people want to hear about what's actually going on the ground. What kind of exploration are you doing? What results are you seeing? And all of that is coming. We want to update people on our plans at Malopo. That's going to be coming soon. But of course, as we've talked about, in terms of the IPOs, I think First Development Resources, which is a huge opportunity for shareholders, and something that has already added a lot of value to the portfolio, but is going to add a lot more when it lists. Is a very big event for us, and it's going to be in some respects, almost a defining event, because it's a major transaction, and it's going to really validate the business more. So when people say, look, you say you're an incubator, what does that actually mean? As you have done, we say, well, look at gold metal as a good example. The next one's going to be First Development and showing how that works. So we're very focused on getting that job done, and we're looking forward to updating people on it going forward.
Thank you, Sean. Tristan, just wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about First Development Resources, and obviously the projects that you're involved in, and obviously I suppose also what First Development Resources, why would it be a good investment proposition?
Certainly. Obviously Sean has talked at length about the spin-out model and why First Development Resources being a success is of significant importance to Power Metal Resources in terms of proving the power incubator model. Look, FDR, as I mentioned, we are an early stage explorer with a focus on Australia, and Australia in itself is a good reason to be interested in the company, simply because it is a fantastic place to do business. It's in terms of its mineral endowment, it's got everything you want there, and in terms of its legal and regulatory framework, we're operating in one of the top jurisdictions in the world. The business, we have early stage projects in Western Australia, where we're focusing on copper gold and base metals, which is neatly complemented by our Northern Territory transition metal project, which is the Celta project. But Look, in terms of, so I think in terms of the whole package, I think the way that the company is structured in terms of what we're exploring it for and the jurisdiction is a key point. I think also that the team which we've established is a really important selling point. The board of directors, which is already in place at First Development Resources, is technical in I guess it has a technical bias, but it also is complemented again by really strong experience in the capital markets, particularly in London. So, and the team, despite us being an early stage small company, are massively so engaged, so invested in what we're trying to achieve that it really is a pleasure to work with them as the only full-time executive. I take great comfort from the quality of the board which we have in place. We also have a very clear focus about what we're trying to achieve. We are a mineral exploration company looking to make a discovery, and that's important because through the mining life, through the mining cycle, companies go through transitional periods where teams have to be restructured and changed, and the focus has to be altered depending on what stage of the cycle that we're in. We're looking to make a discovery. Once we make that discovery, it becomes a very different process for First Development, and like power, we would then look to crystallize value, whether that be through disposal or working with another company to take these things forward, should we wish to do so. I guess another key aspect of the strength of FDR is the fact that we will have, or once we do obtain our listing, is have a very strong and supportive partner in Power Metal Resources, and Power will be a significant shareholder who'll be locked in, which will for a quite significant period of time, which will obviously provide stability to hopefully to the share price post admission. And having that relationship with Power will also give FDR exposure to the resources which also contribute to Power's success. So being part of a collective, albeit with the necessary information barriers in place to ensure that we remain compliant in that regard. We're part of a bigger stable. So I think being together in that stable, but and able to benefit with the resources that Power have will also benefit First Development Resources and shareholders alike. So, and I think the final point which makes FDR an interesting investment proposition is the fact that we are ready to go. So in Western Australia, our key focus is our Walal project, where we are targeting magnetic bullseye anomalies. And for those your listeners who are familiar with Greatland Gold, will be how significant these anomalies to have mineralization. Our critical targets do have is to Javieron, the deposit in the Patterson, and we've got everything in place to allow us to hit the ground running immediately post admission and actually start exploration work very shortly after getting on market. Like in Western Australia, in the Northern Territory, where we're focused on battery metals, lithium, rare earths, we're located in a fabulous jurisdiction just north of Arafura Resources Nolan's project, which is the highest grade NdPr project in Australia. Their success has really put a spotlight on the Arunta region of the Northern Territory, and already as this early stage, we've developed great relationships with all the key stakeholders across our portfolio, but particularly in the Northern Territory, and again with a view to enabling us to get on the ground immediately post admission to carry out that first phase of work to ensure that across the portfolio there is tangible news flow coming to market to keep investors interested, but also building on the story in the hope that we can refine our exploration efforts, hone in on drill targets, and make that significant discovery, which is ultimately our aim.
Yeah, obviously market's been challenging at the moment, and I suppose some of your plans have been delayed. Obviously, it seems that you made a lot of progress that you've made with obviously your assets there, and you're ready to go, as you mentioned. When can we see an IPO listing? Have you sort of got plans to, obviously they have been delayed, but have you got any sort of insight as to potentially when you'd be looking to list?
It's a great question, Rob, and unfortunately it's very difficult to put a specific answer on it. I mean, as Sean has alluded, First Development Resources is the key priority for Power Metal Resources. It's in all of our interests to get this vehicle spun out in the most efficient time possible. As much as it sounds like an all-encompassing excuse, people refer to market conditions as being a factor in everything that's currently going on. But the reality is we are ready to go. As a business, we have been ready to go for several months in terms of the documentation have been prepared and ready to support our proposed and planned listing. We obviously done a lot of work on the ground to ensure that when we do get that listing and the finances necessary to enable us to progress exploration, that everything is in place. But the reality right now is that we're trying to sell something into a market where there's not that many buyers, and it's a very difficult period that we're all currently going through. And I wish I could say more about it. As I say, because we're ready to go, we're speaking to everybody who potentially could help us through Power's network, through FDR's network, through all of our networks, with a view of getting this on market as soon as we possibly can. And as much as I sound like I'm repeating myself, and I know that I am, unfortunately, the best thing for First Development right now is being ready to go, and we are ready to go. And as soon as we start seeing the opportunity to push the button, that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I hope market conditions sort of improve in the short term rather than longer term, so we can see you IPO in the near term as opposed to a longer term.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just, I suppose, just concluding, Sean, I just wondered if you can, have you got any final words for our audience? Obviously, our audience mainly from the mining industry. Just wondering if you had any final words on Power Metals and what we expect to see.
Well, hopefully what investors can expect to see is meaningful updates on our exploration programs, the ones that I mentioned. So, work is going on the ground. We're not just sitting here on assets waiting for commodity prices to go up. We are actually actively adding value to our portfolio of assets, as we speak. And that's number one. And number two, the IPO program led by First Development, and then subsequent to that, uranium energy exploration, UEE, the small spin out for the uranium portfolio that I mentioned, to follow that. So, really what we generate a lot of news, at Power Metal, and because we have such a big portfolio, so investors can expect regular updates on what's going on the exploration side and on the capital markets IPO side. And so we're as Tristan said, look, conditions are difficult. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, we've all been doing this a long time, and it's the hardest that anyone have ever remembered. Both here, Australia, Canada, it's very hard to get capital. But at the end of the day, and it's an old cliche, but good projects always get financed. And sooner or later that will be the case. So we're very confident that we're going to get FDR done very soon. And I should add, by the way, one of the great beauties of the incubator model is that it sits within our portfolio until it doesn't. In other words, we're a very well capitalized business. We did a big capital raise back in May. So we've got cash in the bank. We've got relatively low overhead. We run a very tight ship here. There's not very many of us, and so FDR remains part of the family until it goes off on its own. So it's not like an ordinary IPO that we must get it done. We must get it done because we're running out of cash. It sits within our portfolio. So what that means is we can take our time to get the right deal done. And we can make sure that we've got the right investors. Tristan has done an amazing job building a fantastic set of assets. He's ready to go. It's absolutely dual ready. But let's get this not just done. Let's get it done properly. Get it properly listed, and we look forward to being able to add a lot of value to shareholders going forward. So lots of news to come, and certainly the First Development Resources story very close to a completion.
Yeah, thanks, Sean and Tristan. And if our obviously audience wants to reach out to you and they want to obviously follow your story, which is a interesting story in many jurisdictions, how can they go about doing that? What sort of social networks do you focus on?
Well, we're pretty busy, I would say. We've got a very active presence on Twitter and LinkedIn, certainly. We've got a very good website, which is very regularly updated, powermetalresources.com. We've got very good marketing collaterals across all the project areas, and good information on everything we're doing. But we also have an info at powermetalresources.com, which we monitor every day, and where we're very happy to answer shareholder questions. So if people do want to follow up on any of the things we said today or any of the materials that they might find, they're very welcome to email into us, and we'll do our very best to answer any questions they might have. We also do. We're very pleased to be here with you. We're very keen to talk directly to shareholders in this format, podcasts and so on. So we do regular interviews and updates, but we're always open to any suggestions. If people want to hear from us more or less in different ways, we're all ears. But I think we've got We've got a great online presence, and we're very open, as I said, to direct engagement with investors.
Yeah, and Tristan with FDR.
Yeah, it's similar. So we also have the website, which is the first port of call for anyone interested in first development resources. Like Power Metal Resources, we also have info at firstdevelopmentresources.com, and I'll always very happy to receive any questions or queries, and we'll take pleasure in responding. And like Power, we're also active on social media when we can be. So again, through Twitter and LinkedIn. But we are always available. We want to be engaging with our potential investors or future investors, and we want to take people on the journey with us. So any thoughts as to how we can do our job better? Always happy to listen to that, and we look forward to engaging in a more formal way as the company develops.
Yeah, well, we include all those in the show notes anyway, so people have got easy access to reach out to you. And it's a great story. I've known you guys for a little while now, and obviously conditions are a little bit challenging at the moment, but I'm sure they will smooth out sooner rather than later. So all the best with all the spin outs and Power Metals and FDR. All the best for the remainder of this year going into next year, and perhaps you want to come on next year and give us an update on activities.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Yeah, thanks guys, and thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Certainly a lot to unpack there. Obviously Power Metals in various jurisdictions around the world, in various commodities as well. All these commodities are essential in our industry and our humanity, whether it's battery metals or precious metals. Certainly a lot of information there, and I appreciate you sharing this episode far and wide, all across people within the mining industry, but also people outside the mining industry. So appreciate your continued support, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.